Good evening and welcome to the fourth in a series of forums for the candidates for office for the November 5th elections being held locally in Cayuga County. This forum is hosted by Cayuga Community College, the Citizen, and ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. On November 5th, the voters in the 13th Legislative District for Cayuga County will go to the polls to either vote for the incumbent, freshman legislator Timothy C. Lattimore, or his challenger, Susan E. Martini. The position of a member of the county legislature is a part-time job and has a base pay of $10,100. There is currently discussion to raise the salary to $18,750 halfway through the term of this group running this year in 2016, though that did not make it through the legislature this week. The 15-member legislature has 9 Republicans and 5 Democrats and 1 conservative. The 13th legislative district is centered roughly in the center of the city of Auburn, running from East Genesee Street and taking a dogleg down on South Street out near into the Lake Ave area. Representing the press today is a familiar face to those who have read his column in the Citizen, Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of the Citizen, as well as the one who's been asking questions for at least, I think, now 5 or 6 years. So welcome back. And we'd like to welcome both candidates here. Delighted to have you here for the next hour to answer questions from Mr. Boyer. As we said at the top of the show, we're going to have opening statements from both of you. You drew lots for who goes first. The first candidate will be speaking will be Legislator Lattimore, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence lines. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. And we're the opponent next to me, and I'd like to thank the college and everybody for putting this informational thing in. I know that people tonight are probably watching the Boston Red Sox. Go Yankees. I was going to open up tonight with some economic development news or strategy, but in light of the recent epidemic that we have of heroin in this town, I had a meeting yesterday with our sheriff and our police chief and our DA. And I want to just let everybody know that, we're going to get very, very serious about this particular epidemic of drugs that are flowing in. The last thing we want to do is end up to be like Syracuse, where every night there's a shooting or there's some other incident related to drugs. And if you do the crime here, you're going to do the time. So hopefully our law enforcement people, and I plan on beefing up, having more boots on the ground to keep our young people safe. So that's pretty much it for the opening statement. It's a real problem that we have in our community. As I go around knocking on different doors, the residents know where the crack houses are, and we need to clean them up. We've done a pretty good job in some of the areas of the 13th district. In some of my other positions that I held, we cleaned up the Westlake and some of the other places that did have some problems. But we do need more boots on the ground in order to fight this or combat this ugly disease that's poisoning our kids. So that's my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. We'll now hear from Susan Martini, who is on the Democratic line.
Yes. My name is Susan Martini, and I'm a 32-year resident of Auburn. I moved here to work at the newly opened Schweinfurth Art Center. And I currently own a house on Tuxell Square, along with a business called Tuxell House, which is a guest house. I previously owned Aardvarks and Zippers in downtown Auburn, a lovely little shop. I currently am a consultant to many local agencies and businesses. My 14-year-old daughter Lydia attends Auburn High School, and my mother Judy moved to Auburn about 2.5 years ago after my father passed away, and she lives at Bluefield Manor. I currently serve as the chair of the Human Services Coalition. I'm the treasurer of the BID, the Business Improvement District in downtown Auburn. I'm the moderator of the Mission and Stewardship Committee at Westminster Presbyterian Church. I sit on the Governance Council and the Grants Committee of the Women's Fund of Central New York, and I also sit on one of the Grants Review Committee for the United Way. And I have been a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals of the City of Auburn for 18 or 19 years. And I believe that those personal and professional experiences that I have make me a great candidate for county legislature.
Thank you, Ms. Martini. We'll now have Mr. Boyer ask you questions. He can ask of either or both of you. As we said, we'll rotate how we start the first question. If you want to respond, just give me a look and we'll give you an extra minute, and we'll cut those off after everyone has had equal time. Mr. Boyer.
All right. Well, thank you both for coming and participating in today's forum. I'm going to start with a question. Guy referenced it in his opening about the legislator pay, and the proposal was defeated in the committee process this month to raise the salary for a legislator by 85%. And it seemed like there were a lot of people that felt that was way too high. But my question for both of you is, do you feel like, should there be a bigger discussion about the pay for a county legislator, because that hasn't been changed in quite some time? And if so, how would you go about taking a look at that issue?
And this is for both candidates?
Both candidates. Yeah.
We'll start with Legislator Lattimore. You have 2 minutes.
Well, as you know, I wasn't too popular on the 6th floor with my colleagues when I suggested that we reduce the ledge from 15 down to 5. As you know, or might not know, the general public, that we do have term limits. And presently we've taken away the health insurance benefit from our people on the 6th floor of the electeds. You might know or might not know, I'm the chairman of the county's power authority. I do not receive a stipend for that like other chairmanships that receive $2,500. In my past, I've served both the county and the city for 10 years on the planning board, so I've never been in it for the money. It's more what I can do for people and hopefully create an economic base that can support this overhead called government. So it's never been the money in regards to me. I know that I spend more money than I make at this job, but I continue to try to reduce the amount of government. As you know, we're out of the nursing home business soon, and we got out of the home health aid business. That's less things that we have to govern on the 6th floor. I think that we could do it with less personnel up there.
Thank you, Legislator. Ms. Martini, on this issue of the pay issue, as well as how do you deal with it structurally over the long term?
I was aware of what the pay was when I decided to run for the legislature, and feel comfortable with that, knowing that it's a part-time job. As I've been out and about, attending the forum that Ignite sponsored, there were questions raised about individuals having a more diverse legislature, and it may be that individuals who have full-time jobs would not feel comfortable leaving a job for another part-time job at the rate that it is. And if we anticipate that there will be young and old, male and female diversity on the legislature, it may be something that needs to be addressed. I'm surprised that over the years, if there have been increases for other employees at the county, why there haven't been the same kinds of increases, standard increases for the legislature. I think it's a big bump to go from $10,000 to almost $19,000 in one fell swoop, and that it certainly does need to be investigated.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
All right. Start with a question for Ms. Martini next. You referenced your service on the ZBA, and I think it's even in your district, the Case Mansion, and that recently the project that Ministro has been working on down there at the Case Mansion. The ZBA recently voted against the variance that they were seeking. I think you were one of the votes against, and I wondered if you could please tell us a little bit about how you arrived at that vote and the impact that could have on the neighborhood.
That was a very, very difficult vote, and we had been, I want to say it was either 3 or 4 times they had come before us with their requests for it. The neighbors were very vocal, and in making decisions with the ZBA, one has to take into account the type of impact that any kind of change will have on a neighborhood. And based on the neighbor opinion, that was part of how I made my decision, the neighborhood decision. The other thing was that while there are many wonderful activities going on in the Case Mansion through Ministro Ministries, there scope was larger than what everyone was comfortable with. And while, again, it was a very difficult decision to make, I think that the housing for the homeless, for the veterans, and the other programs that they were wanting to do there are wonderful. It was, the impact on the neighborhood itself was too great.
Thank you. I'm assuming you'll allow
Well,
Legislator Lattimore to respond.
Obviously, it's a project in your district. Your thoughts on what should or should not have happened there?
Well, I grew up on Hamilton Ave. The Y field was my backyard of Clifford Field, and that particular property used to have a high wall. We used to play capture the flag, and Rover, Rover, come over. It was always a thrill to be in the Case Mansion. It's pretty historical. As you know or might not know, my granddaughters live right next door to the Case Mansion in the greenhouse. It was when the Carmelites lived there. It was the Carmelite house. So I have loved ones in the area. I have real concern about what kind of housing would go in there. And as a planning board member for 10 years, the R1 districts were always priority. I mean, we do not want to change the R1 districts into anything but housing. So, I mean, anytime veterans need help, I've had my hand out and helped. I think that, whether that's the right location, the Zoning Board of Appeal voted on it, and they voted it down. So I don't know whether it's being appealed or not being appealed, but they made a decision.
Thank you, Legislator. Mr. Boyer.
I guess just hopefully a quick follow-up on that. What do each of you think should happen with that property? I mean, is it realistic to think that someone will buy it and live in it as a private owner, or is there some level of community service use that's appropriate for that property?
And this is for both of them?
Yeah.
And we'll keep this to 1 minute. So Mr. Lattimore, you'll go first, and then Ms. Martini. Use for the building?
Well, I mean, it's a gorgeous piece of property, and I used to own a piece of property on South Street, which was John Tabor's, who was the watchdog of the Treasury. So South Street is historically unique in its buildings and who lived in those buildings over the years. So, I mean, Charlie Chaplin and John Wayne and everybody used to come and see Mr. Case at that particular mansion. So it could be a lot of different things. I really don't know what's the best use. I mean, the heating bill is about $17,000 a month in the winter, so it would have to be an extraordinary angel to pick that up and support it, or foundation that we might have in the area. But the last thing I want to see it do is go into disrepair.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. Ms. Martini, 1 minute on the issue of usage for that property.
The ZBA could entertain another concept by Ministro Ministries for the use of that building. It would have to be completely different than what he had originally proposed in that space. And I was not opposed to some of the uses that were in that space, just the combination of all of them. They were too diverse. It is a huge building. It is historic. It's a lovely, lovely building. And it does need to be maintained because it is part of the historic district. And I think that's something that just needs to be explored again.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about economic development. A general question for both candidates is just with respect to the county, how do you feel about the general direction that economic development is being handled now at the county level, and what ideas or changes do you have to improve upon what's going on right now?
We'll start with Ms. Martini on this one.
Economic development. One of the things that I see that isn't often taken into account is the increase in tourism in Cayuga County. And I recently reviewed the annual report from the tourism office, and it's almost $100 million a year that comes in based on the sales tax, what's called the heads on beds tax, just a variety of new income and revenue into our county. And I think the facilities that are in Cayuga County, the historic, the arts, the theater, and the beauty of our area are things that we really need to work even harder on promoting outside of this area.
Thank you. Mr. Lattimore, you have 2 minutes on this issue of economic development direction.
Well, economic development is a very important thing, and I think that experience really counts in this area. As our former mayor and moderator today knows that, some time ago when I was a counselor, we flew down to Texas and kept Snyder General from going to Brownsville, Tennessee. That particular building is up for grabs again. I've got somebody who wants to go into that building. They want to put solar panels on the landfill, which is 150 acres, use the excess electricity from the genset that's in the city down by the sewage treatment plant. It would be nice to have that particular building energy free, and I think it could be. I think the milk plant is an excellent example of what can be done in Cayuga County with our ag background. I think that milk, ice cream, yogurt. If we can't make microchips, we'll make potato chips. So I think that we're moving in the right direction. I've tried to patent it after the Batavia Geneseo County Industrial Park.
Did you have anything to add?
Certainly.
You have 1 minute.
I agree with Tim. I think that it's smaller businesses that are going to be in the forefront. And we, as a county, as a city, CETA, the Chamber of Commerce, IDA, all need to work together to come to the board, come to the table together and have a comprehensive offering to new businesses that might be investigating Cayuga County.
Thank you. You'll have 1 minute, legislator.
You mentioned tourism. I love tourism. In fact, the bed tax I introduced to the county back when I was on the council in '88. It's done a tremendous funding thing for the tourism board. But we need not, or we shouldn't give up on the manufacturing end of this thing. I mean, on the planning board, I was around different developers that built steel mills, bottle plants, bun factories, and what have you. So Auburn can be an industrial site again.
Nothing else? Okay, Mr. Boyer.
One of you mentioned CETA, the Cayuga Economic Development Agency, and the county has contracted with CETA to be the first stop provider, provide the staffing needs for economic development. How comfortable or how well is that arrangement working from what you can see so far, and is this something you think the county should continue to fund going forward?
Legislator, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue of CETA.
Well, I'm in agreement that cutting the red tape for anybody who comes to this county or this city should be first and foremost. I mean, you got to go to the when I was mayor and councilor in the city and on the planning board, different developers would have to come to the planning board, the zoning board, the this board, the that board. I mean, it's nonsense. If you can have somebody that can streamline the red tape, it's very encouraging for industry. And I've sent some people over to Andrew and the board, and there's still some glitches that have to be improved. So it's a first good step.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. Ms. Martini, 2 minutes on the issue of CETA and their contract.
If I were a small business looking at Cayuga County and another county, and I were able to go to one office and talk to somebody there who could in turn be the voice of all different areas within the county, I would very much look favorably upon Cayuga County if that person could indeed speak for everybody. Cutting the red tape is a wonderful idea. When someone has a wish to start a business, we need to be encouraging them. I think there needs to be a across-the-board talking with all of the different agencies so that there is an opportunity for somebody to just go to that one place and get all the information that they need.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
Still on economic development, the subject of funding, and I know I've heard a few different people propose that a portion of the sales tax that's collected in the county be used as a funding mechanism for economic development efforts. Is that something that you think is a smart idea, or is it not something that we should be pursuing?
Okay. Start with Ms. Martini.
Use of sales tax. My understanding is that many of the small municipalities really rely on their sales tax revenue to provide services. If it were to take away from that, that would handicap those municipalities. But if sales tax continues to grow, it might be a great idea to tag that for increase in sales tax, essentially, is what it would be. That's a new idea, and I think something that needs to be investigated.
Mr. Lattimore, the issue of CETA and a dedicated fund of sales tax?
Yeah, I think we've had it that way when we talked to the board, and you know, we want to have a multi-year funding, but at the end of that multi-year funding, I want it to come back to the county or the city to make sure that the monies that we're expending on this project, that there's some return on the investment. I want to see, you know, actual jobs created from this operation.
You have a minute to respond.
In regard to the funding for CETA or the one-stop shopping, I don't think we can be quick in making a decision whether or not it is successful. When someone's out looking for a place to build a business, they need time to be able to make decisions and gather their financing and just to have a business plan in place. So I don't think we can give them a year. I think we need to give them a little bit more time than that so that we can see what actually can happen.
Mr. Lattimore, you'll have 1 minute as well.
I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel here in Cayuga County. Steve Hyde, who's up in Genesee County, he has got like 9 different industrial sites up there. I invited them down to try to be the role model for what we should be doing here in Cayuga County. He's just got Mueller, Pepsi, a big milk plant, and he's got all kinds of R&D going on. Steve is the #1 economic developer in the state. So I think that if we model ourselves after that project that's up there, and I think that we should be buying land in Senate to expand, and Weedsport. I think that those are 2 different sites that we should expand into. That's my thoughts.
All right, Mr. Boyer.
One thing that's come up with city-county relations is the sales tax distribution and how much money the city is currently bringing in through sales tax versus what towns in the county are bringing in. City councilors, a few, have been asking for the county to rework the formula that's currently in place. But I guess the first question for both of you as Auburn legislators is that something you support trying to do? Secondly, though, if you do, you got a legislature that's got more people that represent outside towns than inside the city. So how would you go about trying to make that happen on a legislature composed that way?
Mr. Lattimore, you're up first with this question.
Well, as you know, the county of Cayuga, some of the representation in the north and the south really don't consider, you know, they look to Oswego or they look to Cortland. They don't care about the middle that much. They care about the sales tax for their town budget, and that's it. But my #1 thing right now, I would suggest to the people who sit in the council chairs, is to produce more sales tax. I know I had proposals, or I was talking to developers in regards to Alco, taking it down, putting a target up. I think that the city should look at generating more sales tax with the land that they have, rework it, whether it's on Grand Ave. I know that Target was thinking about going into Mustad and some other places. But if the city can generate more sales tax, that might be a thing. And if you look at the formula, with all the tax exempt property the city has, right now the city might be getting more per person, with the assessment per person. There's a formula there, and they might actually make out better producing more sales tax in their own backyard than looking for the county to come across with something. I think the county would be agreeable to work maybe some sales tax for the economic development issue.
Thank you, Legislator. Ms. Martini, you have 2 minutes on this issue of sales tax in the city.
Well, you can already see there's a bit of a conundrum about the whole formula and how it gets divided out. Certainly, the formula needs to be equitable and fair throughout the county. And as I mentioned before, I've spoken to folks out in the county, and many of the small villages and hamlets rely upon their sales tax for essentially their only revenue to balance their budgets. And it wouldn't be fair to withdraw that from them. What would they do then? The city is the heart of the county and needs indeed to be able to offer services. And I agree with Tim. There are ways that the city itself, not the city, but businesses themselves, can start in Auburn, and sales tax could go up. And then the legislature would need to look at an equitable division of sales tax between the city and outside of the city.
Mr. Lattimore, you'll have 1 minute on this as well.
My fellow legislators at the county have a little bit of a problem with the city in regards to funding some of their problems. The city has got themselves into a financial jam. I know that right now the city owes the county maybe $600,000 or $800,000 in regards to the new upgrades that we did to the 911 systems. There's other issues that the county sees. I mean, they just don't understand how the city can take sludge from their sewage treatment plant and take it to Rochester for $800,000. I mean, most farmers realize that if you have a digester, you can, utilize the different materials that come out of that in different ways and be prosperous instead of hauling it when you have your own landfill. So sometimes my associates on the 6th floor do have a problem with some of the city's management styles that have created this financial problem that they have.
Mr. Boyer.
All right. A vote that happened, I guess we're still in the same week, that this week at the county legislature, there was a vote on funding for a feasibility study on a power generation project out at the industrial park in Aurelius, and that got voted down. I believe, Legislator Lattimore, you were one of the people supporting that, or wanted to see that study move forward.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why you supported that and your thoughts on the vote?
Yeah, I'm chairman of the Power Authority, as I mentioned, for no pay. We have a bunch of volunteers that are excellent. They ran Solvay Power Authority and other authorities, Denny Zach in the city, and a great bunch of volunteers. If you had to pay for that brain power, it would be probably $500,000. As you know, Yahoo just put another $170 million in the Lockport, an expansion on their existing investment up there. And the reason that the vice president, who was at the groundbreaking, said that they were in Lockport is because of the climate is a little cooler, because it's easier to heat a building up than it is to cool it down, and the energy costs that the Power Authority of New York gave them. That's the only reason they're there. And U of R's just got a new data processing center in Rochester, multi-million-dollar, and energy was an issue with them. And the same thing with Marcy, has got a new nanoscience building there, and energy is a big key. And as I just said, the climate that we have here, is better. Even this studio, these lights are hot. These are the original lights. I remember when Rod Sterling came here and got this studio open. I mean, those lights are hotter than hot, and LEDs coming in, and it's going to be a lot less power. And the Power Authority itself, I think the majority of the board sees its potential and knows that it can wield power and do a lot of good things for the industrial sites that we have.
Ms. Martino, the question deals with the county's vote on the feasibility study for a digester down at the industrial park.
One of the points that I read was that there was the possibility of a match of the grant or the funding for it, and I liked the idea of that a private investor would have to match whatever was available from the county, and I think that's certainly a good approach to partnering with governmental and then private industry.
Thank you. Just as a note, we're about halfway through our forum for the 13th county legislative seat, which is located roughly in the center of the city of Auburn. We have with us both candidates for that position, incumbent Timothy C. Lattimore, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence line, and his challenger, Susan Martini, who is on the Democratic line. They're being asked questions by Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen.
All right. There is a digester in Cayuga County. The county soil and water district constructed one, but that project was hurt by some cost overruns and some delays. And now that it's running, there's been some discussions between the county and the district over what rates should be charged, as well as the money that the district owes the county. So there's a lot going on there. My question for both of you is, how do we resolve some of those issues going forward between the district related to the digester and the county?
Okay. And I'd like to get back on track if I
Sure.
could, because I know that was an out of sequence. So we'll start with Mr. Lattimore on this issue of the county digester.
Well, the county digester was built with stimulus money, and we have a large industry in this county which is called farming, and we have a large population of cows, and most farms have a digester to treat that material. There are some farms out there that do not have any treatment, and they use that digester to treat their waste material. Now, we can either take two approaches. We can either help the farmers or that industry to take care of their waste products so it doesn't end up in the wrong places, such as lakes where we've had some weed growth in our different lakes. So I'd rather treat these things on the land than to have them go into the clean waters, and then we have to expend larger amounts of money to clean it up. So it's a two-edged sword, that this particular thing. It's not only the energy, but it's the fact that we're trying to get some of the nutrients off the land that are in this great industry called farming, which is one of the largest industries in the whole state.
Thank you. Ms. Martini, on this issue of the county digester.
It's difficult to get information about the digester, and there are certainly varying opinions as I ask people about it. It would appear to me, however, that with the growth of Cayuga Ingredients and the dairy farms in the area, we really do need to address the waste product, the byproduct from the cows, and perhaps this is one way to do it, and that does need to continue to be investigated. I don't have the answer for that because it's a very complicated question and even more complicated solution.
Mr. Lattimore, you'll have 1 minute.
In regards to the digester, the same problem that the city has in regards to having an end user. They keep saying that the cogen in the city's losing money, but they never put in the cost avoidance at the sewage treatment plant. That they don't have any energy bills there, but the heat and the additional electricity can be used in that campus that's out there, and Capusa can wield it anywhere in the country if it wants to. As you know, that there's $100,000 worth of heat that's not being utilized with that digester now.
Thank you, Legislator. Mr. Boyer.
Okay, I think Mr. Lattimore, you mentioned the lake quality, and that's something that is always an important issue in our area. And the county does have a inspector program in place for several years now. But at this point, could there be more, or should we be doing more to ensure the quality and help improve the quality of the lakes from a county level, from what the county legislature can do? And that's my question for both of you. What do you think the county can do to continue that program?
All right. And this question goes first to Ms. Martini.
Water is one of the most valuable resources in the entire Finger Lakes region, and certainly in Cayuga County. And it's something that we should all be very much aware of in terms of health issue. The watershed inspector is someone who needs to remain well-funded so that we can be looking at what's happening with that. I understand that there's also a variety of research being done, sampling being done in terms of the water safety, the quality of the water, and that needs to continue to be gathered so that we can assess what's happening and then to make some very thoughtful decisions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Martini. Legislator Lattimore, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue of lake quality.
The Indians say that the hand of the Indian god had placed it in the Finger Lakes, and that's why we have these. And the Indians also have a 7th generation philosophy. If it's not good for 7 generations deeper, then we shouldn't be doing certain things. I happen to have there was 12 kids in our family, and my father decided to have a place on the lake so that my mother could get some relief. And I remember the lake being as clear as could be. So in one lifetime, I've seen the quality of the lake deteriorate. And Dr. Joe Wasilewski and Dr. Half did a lot of great work in trying to pinpoint the problems that are with the lake. But I can remember diving in the lake, clear as a whistle, without the zebra mussels, and there was never any vegetation in that lake other than 2 spots that I can remember as a kid. And it's just a shame as to how this is happening to the lakes. And I don't think it's just farming. I think it's the residential build-out of the watershed.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. We have a relatively new county administrator. I think she started this summer. So I'm curious about your impressions of the performance the job she's doing so far, as well as the position itself, which the county legislature established 4 or 5 years ago. How well is that working as a form of government for the county?
Mr. Lattimore, you have the first 2 minutes on this.
Well, my first choice was a local lady, Lynn Marinelli, but she's still raising her family. Suzanne is a very capable person. I did go to a department head meeting the other day, and she runs a very, very good ship. And the questions that were being asked were very, very excellent. And I think that time will tell with this budget as to how we're going to be. But I think she can save some money in different departments and maybe do things a little differently, and hopefully come up with some savings so that our budgets don't have to go up like they used to, 22% back in the day. So I think that this particular ledge has been, pretty tight with the purse strings.
And how about the administrator position itself? Is that working the way it should, in your opinion?
Well, we're just going through the first budget cycle, so I think that we have to wait and see how this comes out in regards to budgeting.
Ms. Martini, this issue of both Suzanne Sinclair and also the position as a whole.
Well, I've been attending legislative meetings, and I have spoken with her, and I'm impressed with her responses at the meetings. She appears to have a very solid financial background, and is able to answer questions knowledgeably and quickly. And I think we do have to give anybody in that very complicated and complex position time to show what they have and their abilities. So I'm pleased with what she's doing. In terms of the position itself, the county administrator, I think a professional needs to be in that particular position, and not someone who necessarily rotates out like a county legislator does. And again, I think we need to give that person an opportunity to show what they can do.
Mr. Lattimore, you'll have 1 minute.
Well, you know, the county government is a partner with the state, and the state has 9 different programs that they run, and they don't really give us a lot of funding. So it's always a pain to try to do the budget. But I mean, like Medicare, public assistance, child welfare, preschool, special education, early intervention, indigent defense, probation, youth detention, pensions, and other mandated issues, you know, doesn't give us a lot of flexibility. So what she has to manage that's volunteer is going to be the test.
Thank you, Mr. Lattimore. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. Well, one of the bigger votes this year that the legislature took was the decision to merge the county nursing home and Senate with the Mercy Rehab in the city of Auburn. I know Legislator Lattimore, you voted against that when it was on the floor, but we did see you at the groundbreaking recently. So I'm wondering, you know, your position on that project going forward, has it changed, or are you still against what happened with the way Mercy and the county nursing home are merging?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Lattimore because it sounds like it's directed to him, and then we'll...
Well, process is very important to me, and I mean, I'm on the health committee as a board member, and the information, I mean, the state of New York said, you know, St. Joe's and Loretto got Volatus lobbyists to fill out the grant, and all of a sudden we've got to do business with Loretto. It's almost like, wait a minute, if we're going to pick a horse to help us through this situation, I'd rather be with St. Joe's that just merged with Catholic Pennsylvania and Catholic Michigan, and they're worth $16 billion. I don't know whether we still have Loretto's financials, but you know, right off the top, all of a sudden the state says, well, you know, Mercy's in the rears. We're gonna sweep $5 million off the top of the grant. You know, I've always been supportive of Mercy. When the unions were having problems, I helped them through those situations. I mean, I did not want to lose any nursing home beds, but I mean, we should have had some people in the room to tell us as legislators, you know, a little bit better. I mean, the nursing home at one time, before we got tobacco money, $60 million, and we paid off some of our indebtedness, I mean, the nursing home was giving us $1 million to our bottom line at the county. So things change, and I wanted to have some people like Jason Lesh, who knows an awful lot about the rates. I wanted to know whether or not Mercy could have stayed on its own, whether, you know, we could have had both units and still survive. But we never got that expertise in the room to really make that decision. So I was a little amiss at some of the workup. But I think that the chairman and Mr. Didio and Hans did a good job.
Okay. Ms. Martini, you have 2 minutes on this issue of the county nursing home and the rehab grant.
It certainly appears that it was a very difficult decision for the legislature to make, to merge the two organizations. But at the same time, I read that the state of New York wants counties to get out of the nursing home business. As baby boomers are aging, we are going to need to have facilities that can address our needs as we age. And it would appear to me that the 300 beds that are going to be there are going to be very much needed, and that probably in the not too distant future there will be additional beds needed as well. The county nursing home was a fairly old facility and was going to be needing a great deal of renovation. And $19 million is not something to sneeze at when you're able to work through the consolidation and developing a new partnership. So I'm sure it was a difficult decision. I wasn't involved in it, but I'll certainly be interested to see where it leads.
Thank you, Ms. Martini. Mr. Boyer.
Okay, another decision that happened this week was the Emerson Park Pavilion contract, and it was another very close vote that ultimately the decision was to give a 3-year extension to the current operator, which is based out of Ithaca, to be the exclusive caterer at the new pavilion, or the newly renovated pavilion. Can you explain whether you agreed or disagreed with that decision?
Ms. Martini, you go first on this. You'll have 2 minutes.
Certainly. One of the comments that I heard mentioned by the caterer was that people were hesitant to make any long-range plans in terms of weddings or other kinds of events that would take place there, not knowing who the caterer might be in a year or two. And from friends describing their planning weddings, that's the kind of thing that one has to do today. And it was crippling what he was being able to do. I think he's done some wonderful things, or J&B's done some wonderful things at Emerson Park itself. The idea that he's going to expand some of the services, partnering with Merry-Go-Round, offering some other services there, I think sound like something we need to give him the opportunity to be able to do.
Thank you. Mr. Lattimore, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue of H&J's contract.
Well, I believe the contract states that in order to have an extension, you have to give us notice a year in advance. I don't think that anybody on the board had any kind of knowledge of that particular, seemed to be rushed. I think the year, what are we out to, 2018? I think that that's way too much, and I still think that the projections that Saratoga and Mr. Burns gave us, somebody's wrong in regards to those projections. So I think cost the county about a $500,000 to cut the grass and keep the maintenance up on that park. I think it's underutilized. It's great that the merry-go-round is there. I'd like to see all kinds of action on the island side. If we got to bring back Jitz's and Artie's and White Bridge, or have jazz festivals or some other issues, but we need to produce more out of the contracts that we have with H&J. I think there's no escalators in there. I'm not sure what we agreed on. And as you know, the weighted vote, I think the number of people voted against giving them the extension, but because of the weighted system that we have up there, it passed. And some people never utilized the pavilion, but they have more of a vote from the north or the south. I mean, it's crazy.
We'll move on. We've got about 15 minutes left, so we're going to have mostly about 2 or 3 more questions maximum. Mr. Boyer.
Okay. Well, you touched on a little bit, Mr. Lattimore, but I was going to ask you both about, beyond the pavilion, what more can happen over at Emerson Park, or should happen over at Emerson Park. I've heard people talk about the need for more development of attractions there. Others have said keep it as green as you can, because that's what the attraction is. So for both candidates, do you feel like there needs to be more build out of facilities out at the park?
Okay. This goes to Mr. Lattimore first.
Well, as I just said, that there's a tremendous amount of overhead that we have, and as a kid, I can remember going to the Ferris wheel and all the other attractions that were there, and I think that it's definitely underutilized. Now, whether or not we can put a small hotel up there or some other issue, but it definitely needs to have, I think the last meeting that we had, we're going to pull out the master plan again and see whether or not what it indicates. But definitely it's underutilized, and I think we've had some reunions up there, the 60s and the 70s or 80s or some, but class reunions, and everybody had a ball. So it's a great location, and we've got to pick it up and try to get some of that that overhead money that it costs us to maintain up there.
Ms. Martini, this issue of attractions up at Emerson Park.
Emerson Park is indeed a wonderful natural setting, and certainly one of the only places that people who don't have a cottage or a home on the lake can actually access the water there. So I think it does indeed need to be improved some so that people can enjoy that space. I don't believe that the county should get into the event planning or event holding business, but rather have some kind of contract with others to bring in events like Tomato Fest, and I think we need to be cautious about that. I haven't seen any information about the new paddleboard company that opened up there and what kind of summer they had. I know I talked with Marty in June, and he said that all the rain had kind of curtailed a little bit of the business. I was up there in August and saw a great many people out using the board gondola kind of thing, and it looked like fun. Maybe that's the type of thing that we need to offer to entrepreneurs, to have other types of businesses in that space.
Mr. Boyer, one full 2-minute question.
Okay. Well, one thing that has happened over the years at the county legislature is parties have caucused, and that essentially allows people in the same party to meet privately and discuss issues. And there's been some debate about what should be discussed at those kinds of caucuses and how often they should be held. For both candidates, to what degree do you support going into caucus, and what kinds of things do you think can and can't be discussed at the caucus level before ultimately you have to come out and talk at the full legislature meeting?
Okay, I think this goes to Ms. Martini first.
Well, I must acknowledge I'm a neophyte to those types of activities, having served on other boards and witnessing that there have been caucuses. I find that a bit distracting, and that the true democratic feel on the legislature or on a board is missing when that type of thing does indeed happen. We would lose the opportunity to collaborate and share information, and I'm not sure that there's always a benefit to caucusing.
Mr. Lattimore, the issue of whether there should be caucuses and what should be done, what should be allowed in there and not allowed in there.
Well, in my public life, I think I've voted against executive sessions or caucuses or whatever you want to call them. I'd like to do business out in the open as much as we can. Sometimes with personnel, I mean, if it's a legal matter that we could end up getting sued over, we have to go into executive sessions. But I'm not in favor of doing the public's business behind closed doors. I think there was a caucus Saturday I didn't go to, and I haven't. I think I've been in the public eye for a number of years. I've never been accused of making a deal in the back room and then bringing it out to the front. So I like to do business where you can see it, where everybody can hear it.
Thank you both. Mr. Boyer, thank you for your questions. We're going to now end up with our closing statements. As we said, you drew for lots. You'll have 2 minutes for closing. Chris is still keeping an eye on you to make sure that you keep to 2 minutes. We'll start with Ms. Martini, who is on the Democratic line.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone for giving us the opportunity to discuss topics today. It was quite interesting. The role of the Cayuga County Legislature is to represent, educate, and advocate for the citizens of and residents of Cayuga County. Using my experiences, both professional and personal, I will listen, observe, do my homework, research, and respond to local needs to the best of my abilities, drawing on the expertise of the staff at the county, and following discussions with fellow legislators while building coalitions. I know it will be a challenge, but I really look forward to that challenge, and I'm ready for that. And I recently read a quote from Sandra Day O'Connor, Supreme Court judge, and she said that as a judge, she always makes sure that she gathers information, reads it, doesn't make a decision beforehand, but listens carefully, then makes her decision. And that's what I hope that I will be able to do as the legislator for District 13.
Thank you, Ms. Martini, who is on the Democratic line. We'll now hear from the incumbent, Legislator Timothy C. Lattimore, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence lines.
As you know, I've served for a while, and there is no substitute for experience. And the oldest call in politics is we need a change. There is going to be a change. We have term limits. I'm in the second phase of my three terms. As you know, I voted against any pay raises. I took away our health insurance. I don't get paid for any additional chairman's pay as the Power Authority's people, but I do want to alert the electorate to one thing. On the ballots this year, on the back of the ballots, the governor does have a proposition about gaming. And as you know, when I was mayor, I did propose, long before the governor even thought about putting this ballot on, that the Elko site would be a good area for us to build one of these $800 million hotel convention centers that would have brought in 4 million visitors, that would have paid $8 million in property taxes, would have had 1,800 union jobs. The city of Auburn wouldn't be worried about sales tax or anything else, or cutting crossing guards or firemen with an additional $8 million in property taxes. But if you like that, I mean, you're gonna have an opportunity to vote for that on the back of the ballot. So think about it. I talked to our lawyers at the county. I don't know whether that's going to help us or hurt us. As you know, the Oneidas were part of the blackout. We're supposed to get some money. It's just, when opportunities arise, we have to move on them. And as I mentioned, the milk plant, hopefully we'll have ice cream, yogurt. As I said, if we can't make microchips, we'll make potato chips. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Legislator. We want to thank you again both for not only showing up here for this hour to have questions asked by Mr. Boyer, but also for putting yourselves out there in the campaign. It's not always easy. With about a week and a half to go, another 10 days, good luck on the campaign trail from all of us. We also want to thank you for listening to the candidates for the 13th Legislative District. You will be able to watch this not only on Time Warner tonight, but you'll also be able to download it on the Citizens website, auburnpub.com, after this plays tonight, as well as on Saturday and Sunday at 6 p.m. on both of the ARMA channels, which are Time Warner channels 12 and 98 and FiOS 31. And from there, we'll then wrap up with our series of forums on Tuesday. We have the candidates confirmed now are Terry Cuddy, Christy Angelis, Debbie McCormick, and incumbent Matthew Smith. So we hope you'll join us for that last forum here. You can always send us your thoughts and questions. You can contact us at cozguytho@aol.com. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. I want to thank you for watching. I hope you have a good evening and a great tomorrow.